So, I mean, speaking of the challenges of building sync engines and query engines and all the other things, we were talking about some consistency issues earlier. So it's like, what sorts of challenges, not just consistency, like what sorts of challenges have y'all run into? And like, are there any like sort of things that you still have to work through as you're going towards beta and beyond?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just to define the terms, I mean, I think a lot of like UI developers and like web developers aren't used to thinking of like distributed systems. And like consistency is like this term that's used in databases and systems like this. And it like sort of broadly means like what guarantees does the system make about the data that you'll receive, like an answer to your query. You do a query against a database and the database is like changing at the meantime, like while you're doing this query. Like what rules does the system like enforce about what version of the data you'll see? You say you do a query that like selects all the users, and meanwhile a user's added. You see that user or not? Or like say that you're doing a query for users and like somebody runs a query that deletes all the users whose names start with A. Like, do you see any users that have the name A? Do you see none? What are the rules? And so like this comes up actually for UI developers often, like consistency problems, but I think we're just not used to thinking of them. Like a really common problem in like current like stacks for web apps is like, if you're using something like React query, like you can easily end up in a situation where like your UI shows like one state of the data in one place and another state of the data in another place. They're inconsistent with each other, because like maybe the cache for one of them was updated, but the cache for the other one wasn't updated, or like say you did an optimistic mutation, but you forgot to update the like optimistic result for one query. So like they show inconsistent results, right? One of the things that falls out of using sync engines is you get like consistency. Usually when you use like today's sync engines, you get consistency for free because you're syncing the whole data all together, as one like sort of atomic unit. And then you run these reactive queries on top. And so like the cache, like in Apollo, there was this concept of a normalized cache, but it wasn't like fully normalized and you didn't have queries on top. But like in a sync engine, what happens is you're syncing a database to the client and you run reactive queries. So like when the database changes, all the reactive queries update together. So it's like really nice. That's what we mean by consistency. Where you do an optimistic mutation in one place and all the queries that are using that row, they all automatically update to reflect it automatically. So in today's sync engines, like that's commonly the experience that you get, but that is relying on the fact that you're syncing all the data, right? So when you introduce partial sync into the equation, then what happens? So the consistency problems that exist in today's alpha have to do with when you have like a partial subset of the data. Like here's an easy case to imagine. Like say that you have like a bug tracker and the bug tracker has like 100,000 rows in it. And you've synced like the first 10,000 rows. And you do a search for all the bugs that are assigned to Justin, right? And say that the current sort of the UI is like created descending. So we've got the first 10,000 rows sorted by created descending, and we do a filter for like owned by Justin, right? If we had the first 10,000 rows sorted by created descending and you do a filter over that, you'll see the correct subset. Maybe there's like 100 rows that match the filter. You'll see the correct first 100, right? But now say that in the UI, you change the toggle, the sort, to be sorted by created like the opposite way. We were doing created descending, now we do created ascending, right? So now if we want to update the UI optimistically, like instantly in response to the sort change, we'll again do the query over the 1,000 rows that we already have, and we'll again get like some results for that filter, but they won't be the ones that are at the end, that would have, they won't be the correct result if we had asked the server, right? So we'll get like some results optimistically, and then a second later when the server result comes in, we'll get different results and the UI will flicker. And again, going back to like the central motivation for building these things, we're like UI developers, we want to make really good UI. And this kind of flickering is not okay with us as UI developers. And like a lot of people that we've talked to and described this consistency problem, they're like, oh, like that's how I expected it would work. Like they weren't expecting it to be any better than that. But like, this isn't okay with us. We want the system to return an optimistic result instantly, the majority of the time. But if it can't return a correct result, it should not. And it should wait for the server to return a result so that you don't get a flicker, because we want to avoid that flickering. So that's what the documentation is referring to when it talks about consistency problems.
Yeah, lots to unpack with a sync engine and a query language. Lots in there.
But I mean, there's a lot of complexity, and I hope when I'm explaining this, it's like I hope that it's coming through to the audience. I mean, it's just like if you talk about like a database, right? Inside the database, there's so much going on. But outside, you just do queries and get results, and it's really fun. And so like if we talk about like how Zero works and like what makes it special and what we're excited about, like a lot of it is like on the internals. But like the end result is like you do these queries in your UI and like they update automatically. And most of the time they resolve instantly. And when you do optimistic mutations, those are instant. And it's like a really fun way to build.
Yeah, the DX you see in the docs for like the solid and the React examples, like the docs are like 400 pixels tall because it's like once you know how the thing works, it's like, oh, it's obvious how I would integrate this. So definitely great DX there. But moving on to some important topics, tools have to make money, and at some point, Zero will have to make money. So what does the SaaS product offering for Zero look like?
Yeah, it's pretty standard playbook that we're thinking. Like we're going to offer, I mentioned that there's this Zero cache server that runs as part of the system that implements the server side of the sync protocol. Right now, in order to use Zero, you have to run this server yourself. And it's not like, it's kind of a departure from like, if you're, databases are stateful servers. Everyone's so used to using these like stateless serverless things. But like databases have to be stateful, sadly. And so do sync engines. You have this Zero cache is a stateful server. It's a distributed system. It's got to run on like multiple nodes, and it has like a coordinator node. And it's not like, for like an experienced like backend engineer, it's not like a huge amount of effort to run. And we have, dozens of people running it like seriously after like just a month. And so you can do it, but it's effort, right? The same way that running Postgres is effort, right? And most people don't want to do that. And so for those vast majority of people who are not interested in running their own sync engine server, or who want us to do it and keep it working, we will offer Zero cache as a service, and we'll probably charge like rates like sort of comparable to like Postgres as a service, or like hosting as a service and things like that. And then we also have a number of like bigger users who have told us that they want to run it inside their own like Amazon like VPC, and they don't want to like rely on it as a service. And I think this is like an emerging trend with like bigger customers. And so we're really excited about like making that really easy, making that experience really easy. I think like PlanetScale has this really cool model like for how they make like the majority of their money, where they like sort of run PlanetScale. They like literally run it, like on behalf of customers, like inside the customer's VPC. And they have like really advanced tools for doing this. And I think that's a direction that I'm really interested in going.
Yeah, I think especially for like enterprises, it's like they want more and more things happening in their VPC, like less things happening outside. So that seems like a very feasible model, and something that you'll likely have to push into in the future anyway. But that's exciting. I feel like it slots itself well into like a clear value add, which is kind of like always what you want when you're building out something like this. So you're in alpha now. We talked about some of the consistency things that you're thinking about. What do you think for beta, and like how long have you planned for this cycle to go? Or are you just like trying to test it out with customers and just see what things are come out? Or do you have like concrete plans? Like earlier you mentioned the mutators as like a concrete thing that you're like looking to add. Is there like a lot more things like that you're sort of aiming for before you land?
Yeah, the main things like for like feature wise for beta, there isn't a huge number. Like we have the roadmap on the website, and it's basically like custom mutators are like the big new feature. There's also like a bullet in there that's like, it's a little bit like poorly worded. I need to clarify it, but like basically like an LRU cache system for the query. Like right now, when you open a Zero query, it syncs, and you open another Zero query, it syncs. But then when you close the query, it stops syncing. It's very like direct. The lifetime of these queries is like very explicit. But like in order to make this system like more usable, the query should actually, if you open a query, and then you stop using it, it should actually keep syncing that query for a little while. Because you already have the data, why throw it away? And also like most likely, like commonly the user will navigate back and they'll need that query again in the future. So it makes sense to keep it so that you can have the navigations be snappy. Like say that you have two views in your app, you navigate from A to B. When you navigate back to A, you want that to be instant, right? So in order to make that work really well and make the way people expect, we need to keep these queries running for a little while after you stop using them, and then like age them out. So that's another big feature. The consistency stuff we were thinking that we would do for beta, but like all our users keep telling us that it's not a problem that they've hit yet. So we might like punt that. And then the other big thing is just like, we're going to keep scaling up like how much data we've tested it with, have like a demo where we have like a really big data set running in it, like a fake bug tracker that has like, a million bugs in it or something like that. The beta timeframe, like summer-ish, I think is what we're aiming for. Our company is traditionally like really conservative with like the labels that we assign. Like a lot of people have said that the product is a lot further along than they expect from an alpha. And, you know, I think like for beta, like the sort of quality bar that we're going for is like, you know, if you're building something like Linear or Notion or Superhuman, something like basically like any like SaaS, it's like a productivity app, and you're building it from scratch and you're starting new, Zero will be something that you should definitely look at. Like, I'm not like bombastic enough to say like it would be the best way to build that, but like, you know, I think it would be something you should definitely consider. And I think for a lot of those applications, it will be the best way to build it at the beta timeframe. The main thing that will be different between beta and GA will be the SaaS. So like at GA, there will be a SaaS that you can use and you won't have to run the server.